We are up in the bird's nest here at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. I'm Brendan Mortensen alongside rec soccer champion Annie Claff.
Rec soccer makes it sound so much worse.
What do you want me to say? Soccer champion?
Yeah.
Premier League champion?
Yeah,
Annie
that
Claff?
works with me.
Premier League champion would not be true. But you are a rec soccer champion.
Polo,
That's rec soccer.
I guess. Just rec soccer to me sounds like a.
So you'd prefer volo soccer to rec soccer, even though you are playing recreational sports at volo soccer.
Yeah, but when I hear like rec soccer, I'm thinking like little kickers, like yay, like you're 10 years old or something. I don't know.
Sure. Fine.
Anywho.
Whatever. You're still a rec soccer champion, and that's the important thing.
And you are a rec soccer champion fan. Brendan showed up
I was there.
all 3 games.
I was there. I was supporting my former team, Pathetico Madrid.
Yeah.
Shout out friend of the podcast, Austin, on his rec soccer championship. A big week for you.
Yep.
Not so big of a week for the Orioles.
No.
Had a tough stretch, tough weekend up in Toronto. They were officially eliminated from playoff contention yesterday, despite the win, despite beating the White Sox 8-7. And of course, we do have more injury updates that we need to talk about because it would not be an episode of The Bird's Nest if we didn't. We'll start with the good ones, I suppose, which is that Jordan Westberg is back in the big leagues. He was on a rehab assignment with AAA Norfolk. It was a very quick one, and now he is back, and Adley Rutschman is starting a rehab assignment down in AAA Norfolk, which will take about a week, and then he will be back for a handful of games at the end of the season, I suppose, but still positive injury updates for both of those guys.
Yeah, definitely good to see them get some more playing time before the season is over. I mean, we kind of talked about it last week where it was going to be short rehab stints if there were any at all for both of them. So you're happy to see them get a little bit more playing time and eventual playing time for Adley Rutschman at the big league level before the season's over.
Yeah, it's not going to be a ton of games in the big leagues for either of those guys, but bottom line is when you're healthy and playing baseball, that's a good thing. A bad thing on the injury front is Albert Suarez, who is getting a second opinion on his elbow. He's on the 15-day injured list with right elbow discomfort. It's not good.
No.
We don't know what the second opinion is going to say and what the prognosis for Albert Suarez could possibly be. But you just never like to hear right elbow discomfort.
Yeah.
He was the opener for the Orioles game in Toronto on Sunday, goes 3 innings, looked solid there. Of course, with Albert Suarez, there is always the back and forth with him. Sometimes he is a bullpen arm. Sometimes he's a starter. It's a role that he was really effective in 2024. And then he misses a majority of this season, comes back later on in the year. You're excited to have him in the bullpen. He has been a good piece. And now he hits the injured list. So no reason to panic at this point because we don't know what the second opinion is going to say. But as mentioned, you hear elbow discomfort and your mind goes to bad places.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard not to think of the worst possible outcome when you hear elbow discomfort. But in an episode, or at least an episode where we're about to talk about our favorite storylines of 2025, one of them that I think about from 2024 is how good Albert Suarez was and how clutch he came up in big moments, especially when Grayson Rodriguez fell to injury, and him coming up in that one game is very memorable to myself and probably a lot of other Orioles fans and media members. But I think that it's very difficult to comprehend, especially when you look at, okay, there were a set of 3 Orioles pitchers coming back from injury this year. 2 of them have done very well. Albert Suarez was doing very well and then obviously fell to another injury. So hopefully it's nothing too serious, wishing him the best, and hopefully he can be a key piece in 2026 as well.
Yeah, and it's just to end this season with another pitching injury. Hopefully there is not another one over the next week and a half, but that's the same thing we said a week ago where it was hopefully there's no more pitching injuries over the final few weeks of the season here. It took Albert Suarez so long to come back, and he looked great upon his return, and then he just goes down with right elbow discomfort, and you're looking at this Orioles team that is now probably about to use their 40th pitcher of the season at some point here soon. They have already shattered the franchise record for players used in a single season. They are nearing the all-time record for just any team in baseball, which is ridiculous. That's just how this season has gone injury-wise. it kind of in the wrap up of our positive storylines here, we're going to talk about the fact that this has been a competitive team for 3-4 months, and the amount of injuries that they have had and had to fight through makes that all the more impressive. But it's just, it just keeps happening.
I know.
Here we are again.
I know. It's really, if we were to do an episode on sad storylines, the top one would for sure be all the injuries, similar to last season as well. But obviously, we're going to put a positive spin on it. There are still a number of storylines that I think you come away from the 2025 season looking at like, okay, if regardless of the season's outcome, like you are still really happy that X, Y, and Z happened for 2026 and beyond, because there are a number of them, which we're about to get into, that you kind of look at saying, I would have wanted that to happen regardless of if the Orioles were in playoff contention or not.
Sure.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, and we're not doing an episode on the worst storylines of a year because that would be a massive bummer.
Yeah.
I know last night was a bummer with the Orioles being eliminated from playoff contention officially, but as you mentioned, there are plenty of storylines that are real positives for the season and huge boosts potentially going into 2026. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to start with Trevor Rogers, who has been the topic of discussion for a lot of our past few podcasts, because our last podcast was about the most valuable Oriole, and both of us said that there is a pretty strong case there for that to be Trevor Rogers. The worst trade in Orioles history, Trevor Rogers, has been one of the best pitchers in baseball for the last 3 months. He is going to get Cy Young votes. He has a 1.43 ERA in 16 starts. And it is just a really cool story thinking about where he was. Last year, he has talked so much about where he has been mentally, and it's outstanding to see him pitch this well over the course of a season.
Yeah, I mean, that was obviously my top favorite storyline of the year.
Yeah, it's the best storyline of the year.
I literally have Trevor Rogers, as my number one note for the best storylines. But like you mentioned, 1.43 ERA. We were doing some digging on stats, at least you were before this, and I have them written down now. But best in MLB, best ERA in MLB since he came back to the big leagues on May 24th. Paul Skeens is after that with 183 and Tarek Skubal with 196, but also best among all MLB pitchers with at least 12 starts with that 1.43 ERA. So really, really impressive stuff from Trevor Rogers this season. Like you mentioned, just kind of that turnaround from 2024 after he came to the Orioles after the deadline, and just even in his entire career. It's an insane storyline and kind of a comeback story that people will remember for years in baseball. Yeah,
and credit to the Orioles for figuring out ways that Trevor Rogers could get back to his, Rookie of the Year runner-up form. And it's also a good storyline if you are an Orioles fan, not just because of how cool the story itself is, having a guy who was questioning whether or not he could pitch in the big leagues become one of the best pitchers in baseball over the last 3 months, but it changes your calculus for 2026 as well.
Yeah.
The Orioles more than likely will go into the offseason still needing starting pitching help. Whether that is on the depth side or a frontline starting pitcher, you can certainly make an argument both ways. I think there is an argument to be made that they still need a front end of the rotation pitcher. But Trevor Rogers now changes your calculations in your offseason planning.
Yeah.
We're going to get to another positive storyline, which is Kyle Bradish coming back and looking outstanding just in a bit. But at the top of your rotation going into next season, you feel pretty confident in the fact that you have Kyle Bradish and Trevor Rogers there. Hopefully you have a healthy Grayson Rodriguez as well. Dean Kramer has been a solid piece and will continue to be a solid piece in 2026. We'll see what role they decide to have for Tyler Wells going into next season. But Trevor Rogers going into this year, if you were looking into the future, was not somebody that you penciled in as a surefire starter. Even. We went into this season thinking that Trevor Rogers could compete for the 5th spot in the rotation. He was in that conversation with guys like Cade Povich and Chase McDermott. He has now separated himself to the point where you are confident in having him as your number 2 if he's behind Kyle Bradish there for the opening day start. You feel good about Trevor Rogers being one of the 3 best starting pitchers in your rotation next season. Some regression is obviously going to happen. He's not going to have a 1.43 ERA next season. Feel fine about that. But if the ERA is in the low 3s next year. That is a frontline starting pitcher. And his ERA is a run and a half better than that right now.
Yeah, and it also puts you in a very different perspective and position that the Orioles were headed into the offseason last year where, okay, you knew Corbin Burns, your ace, was going to be a free agent at the end of the season. So you were kind of looking towards the offseason, okay, who are the Orioles going to acquire to be that number one ace? Because you had Zach Eflin and Grayson Rodriguez at that point in time who are kind of either going to be 1 and 2 or vice versa. Obviously, both of them fell to injury at the beginning of 2025 season, but you're a very different point in time where the Orioles are right now because you're going into the 2026 off or to the 2025 off season knowing that you have Trevor Rogers, Kyle Bradish, hopefully Grayson Rodriguez, obviously if things go well with his rehab, or I guess his injury right now.
Injury recovery, yeah.
And then you also have the opportunity to acquire some free agents in the offseason. So I think that you're in a much stronger position going into the offseason pitching-wise and starting rotation-wise than you were in 2024.
Yeah, 100%. Because if you bring in some free agent starting pitching help, all of a sudden you get down the stretch of next season and you are potentially looking at a top of the rotation that includes Kyle Bradish, Trevor Rogers, Grayson Rodriguez, and a stellar free agent, Dean Kramer, in that conversation as well. So that is a really good place to be if you are the Orioles looking at your pitching options for next season. Another player who has really impressed and I think changes your calculus for next season a good bit, Dylan Beavers.
Yeah.
One of my favorite storylines of the season. Coming into 2025, Dylan Beavers has always been a good prospect. He was a high draft pick out of Cal, but there were a lot of things to work on for Dylan Beavers. And in 2024, it's an OPS just over 750 in 120 games in AA, which isn't a bad season. He was just 22 years old. It's nothing that you are really complaining about if you are looking at Dylan Beavers as a potential prospect that could help you with the big league level. But given how quickly we had seen some of these Orioles prospects progress throughout their minor league career, Dylan Beavers spending 120 games in AA wasn't lighting the world on fire.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he gets to AAA Norfolk and he is outstanding there this year. And then he comes to the big leagues. He has an 858 OPS right now. I think coming into the season, Dylan Beavers was maybe a top 10 prospect in the system. I think he still probably was, given the defensive upside and given some of the offensive potential that he still had. He just wasn't flashing it as much as you would like. And then this season completely turns things around. And he is playing like potentially a starting outfielder for this team next year. I think there is an offseason conversation to be had, and I'm sure we will have one, about what this Orioles outfield will look like next season and whether Dylan Beavers is going to be an everyday starter. But he's certainly making the case. It's a walk rate close to 20%. As mentioned, an OPS over 850 on the year. That changes the conversation surrounding this Orioles outfield next season that has some question marks going into the offseason because of, you're moving Cedric Mullins. Do you need to go out and get another piece there? Dylan Beavers isn't somebody that you anticipated feeling good about potentially being a starter next year, and now I think you can make that case.
Yeah, and maybe even Rookie of the Year in 2026 too.
Absolutely.
I also 100% love that this Dylan Beavers storyline even came into play to begin with, because obviously the Orioles were in a very unique position where you weren't necessarily trying to make a playoff push in August and September, and you had two top prospects in the organization that you wanted to see come up and kind of ignite a fire under this Orioles big league level team to begin with. And I think with Beavers, it's a very interesting storyline as well, because when you look back at how he was in the minors, at least in AAA, when I spoke with Tim Fedorovich, he was like, okay, obviously that there's been some swing adjustments with Beavers and kind of plate adjustments in general, because we tried to get him to be a little bit more aggressive at the plate because he is such a patient, sometimes too passive type of hitter.
Yeah.
And in turn, that made Beavers a lot better in terms of like average exit velocity, just more power in general as being more aggressive. But you look at how it's translated to the big leagues right now, where he is still just as patient as he was beforehand, if not even better, because it makes it 100 times better when you see a guy that has a walk rate almost of 20% in the big league level, which is one of the best, if not the best, right now at the big leagues. So you kind of look back at how he worked in the minor leagues, was okay, maybe a little bit too passive, but then he started to make progress on the average exit velocity, hard hit rates, you name it. but then he gets to the big league level and he kind of just settles down and is still that patient guy and knows how he works and knows what is best for him.
Yeah, the level of calm is super, super impressive out of Dylan Beavers. And you mentioned the aggressiveness. It's selective aggressiveness now. Dylan Beavers gets ahead in counts with that walk rate. And here's a crazy stat from StatCast. When Dylan Beavers is ahead in the count and pitchers throw him a fastball, they do that 65% of the time, because usually when a pitcher is behind, they'll try to even the count with a fastball. Against the 98 fastballs that Dylan Beavers has seen when he is ahead in the count this season, he is hitting .529 and slugging .941.
Yeah, it's insane.
That's ridiculous.
I mean, even just overall with fastballs, too, he's slugging .556 as a whole.
He has a plan, and it's a really good one. And Samuel Basallo is in that storyline with Beavers as well. Two guys that, as you mentioned, the Orioles were not in a playoff push position, and so you're able to give playing time to Samuel Basallo and Dylan Beavers. I didn't include Basallo here just because we kind of knew what Samuel Basallo was capable of and what he was going to do, but Dylan Beavers has taken a massive step forward this season. Speaking of massive steps forward, hello, Jeremiah Jackson.
Yeah.
The adopted member of the Orioles Young Prospect Corps, hitting .290 with an OPS over 800. Jeremiah Jackson, when he was called up to the big leagues after the trade deadline, I think he was seen by many as just okay, you get called up. We need to fill some spots. Here's Jeremiah Jackson. He's having a nice season at AAA Norfolk. Let's give him a shot. And now, again, this changes your calculus going into 2026, because we were ready for a conversation of, hey, you just dealt Ramon Arias at the trade deadline. This team is without a utility piece off the bench. You need somebody who can fill in somewhere in the infield. Jeremiah Jackson has even added the ability to play the outfield, even though he only played 7 minor league games in right field. He has played a lot of right field for Baltimore at the big league level. But Jeremiah Jackson, I would be shocked if he is not a member of this 2026 team. He can do a little bit of everything, and he has been hitting the ball really well. His defense is coming along at different spots. It's a hard thing to do, to go from playing a corner outfield to the corner of the infield at third base, but he's finding a way to do it. And again, this is a player, a former second-round pick, could not get out of AA.
I know.
He spent 4 seasons there, 7 seasons in the minors as a whole. The Orioles just brought him in this offseason on a free agent minor league contract, and now he's doing this.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to be an important piece of this team next year.
And I'm sensing a little bit of a pattern with our favorite storylines in 2025, is all of them were somewhat or mostly unexpected. A little bit, which is kind of interesting to think about, because you look at how the Orioles 2025 season has gone as a whole, where they kind of fell below expectations, but you still find like diamonds in the rough here with Trevor Rogers, Dylan Beavers, Jeremiah Jackson, but he was one of those guys that Tim Fedorovich in mid-June maybe said, okay, if this guy's not on your radar, Jeremiah Jackson needs to be. And it is 100% that way as well. This is a guy that for the Orioles has an .864 OPS with runners in scoring position, which is something that the Orioles desperately needed this season and where they fell really flat in early parts of 2025. So like you mentioned, you kind of have to figure out a way where he belongs in the 2026 roster. Would not be surprised in the slightest if he is that utility guy. Maybe would be interesting to see if after an off season and spring training, he slots more in specifically to just outfield or infield. But we've seen the Orioles deal with guys like Ryan O'Hearn where they play both or even just designated hitter. So I wouldn't be surprised if Jeremiah Jackson is on that roster.
Yeah, you'll find spots for him, because Jeremiah Jackson has just put up too good of numbers in 40 games to not figure out where you want to put him next season. Is it going to be a starting role? More than likely not. When guys are healthy, this is an infield that is really, really set with Jackson Holliday, Gunnar Henderson, and Jordan Westberg. It's an outfield that is also presumably set with, Tyler O'Neill, assuming he picks up his player option for next season, Colton Cowser, perhaps Dylan Beavers, maybe Jeremiah Jackson gets into that equation as well. But I think he is going to be an important piece next season. And as we have mentioned, it is somebody that you probably don't see if the Orioles are in a different spot in the standings. He certainly doesn't get this extended of a look if you didn't trade the guys away at the trade deadline that you dealt away. And speaking of places where you probably wouldn't be if you weren't where you are in the standings. That's the improvements in the farm system.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite storylines of the year. 7 of the top 10 prospects in the Orioles system, according to MLB Pipeline, were not in the top 10 to begin the year. And 5 of those 7 players were acquired this year. You had 4 top draft picks in Ike Irish, Caden Bodine, Vahiva Aloy, and Slater DeBrun. That last draft pick in DeBrun, you acquired in the deal that sent Brian Baker to the Rays.
Yep.
And then you had a few huge jumps from guys internally. Esteban Mejia is in the top 10. Nate George. Just outside of the 10, you can look at Michael Ferret, Trey Gibson, Braxton Bragg. And I think the biggest improvement that this Orioles farm system has made, along with some of the top talented position players that you have, the depth of the pitching prospects. I mean, I just mentioned Mejia, Ferret, Gibson, and Bragg, but to go along with those guys, you have Jerron Watts-Brown, Nestor Herman, Joseph Jerwa, Levi Wells, and Patrick Riley that all profile as potential big league starters. That's 10 arms that could maybe be rotation pieces. That's a huge jump from where this farm system was a season ago.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And it is, and you can look back, I know we talked about in the offseason where, okay, this farm system is going to look very different because you have guys that have graduated. Now that the Orioles are at a point in time where the farm system looks very different, not only because you've graduated a lot of guys, it'll look very different next year, especially when Samuel Basayo, Dylan Beavers graduate, but you've also added a ton of depth at the trade deadline, at the draft, like you mentioned, in all of these guys. And also there's 14 pitchers in the top 30, which is a huge difference to how the Orioles have been historically, at least in the Mike Elias era. And I think that, for me at least, you look back at the trade deadline where, yes, it was a very sensitive topic because you kind of knew that you were going to have some free agents leaving at that point in time. Obviously, Ryan O'Hearn, Cedric Mullins, Ramon Laureano, Ramon Arias are big names that we all thought, at least most of them would be gone. Ramon Arias, not necessarily. But you kind of look at the way that the Orioles came away from the trade deadline, the way that they could enhance the farm system in the way that they did, I think is really, really impressive and crucial to the kind of outcome that you come away walking 2025 with. We had that one episode where we said, okay, how can you still make the 2025 season salvageable? How can you still evaluate success in the 2025 season and one that fell below expectations? This is a major way to do that, where you have a big league roster at this point in time at the end of September, is pretty competitive for 2026, but you also have a bunch of guys, like you mentioned, that could factor in at the pro level, at the big league level next year. Also some guys that aren't even in this top 30, like Tyson Neighbors, who could be a reliever come opening day next year. So I think really, really exciting and pivotal stuff happened on the farm this year, which probably wouldn't have happened again if you were in a playoff position. Yeah,
Tyson Neighbors, Anthony Nunez, another one outside of the top 30 that I think more than likely is in this bullpen in 2026 in some capacity. I think among the starting pitchers that I named, it's not unrealistic to think that 5 or 6 of them have the ability to make an impact next season. Whether they do or not, who's to say, based on what the Orioles need next year, but you're looking at 5 or 6 of those guys that are going to be somewhere between the AA and AAA level. Trey Gibson is already at AAA. Ferret has been putting up impressive numbers in AA. Braxton Bragg was dominating that level before getting injured. So there are plenty of guys there that if, the chips fall in certain ways, they could be important pieces in this 2026 rotation. Speaking of the 2026 rotation, I've really got transitions for all of these here.
Yeah, seriously.
One of the best storylines for me as well, Kyle Bradish and Tyler Wells coming back and just not skipping a beat.
Yeah.
Kyle Bradish still looks really good. And if he is anything similar to the pitcher that he was in 2023, where he was a top 5 AL Cy Young finisher, you have an ace in your rotation. And Kyle Bradish is capable of putting up ace type of numbers. He has the strikeout stuff. The velocity still looks exactly like it did 2 years ago. Kyle Bradish just coming back and still being Kyle Bradish, you never know with that kind of stuff.
Right.
I mean, it's a major surgery for Kyle Bradish to come back from, for any pitcher to come back from Tommy John. And he comes back and just, boom, yep, Kyle Bradish is back. Great.
Yeah. And also it's just a testament to how Kyle Bradish operates as a pitcher, because we saw when he got that injection and when he was working through a lot of pain in 2024, he even pitched better than before,
Yeah.
I think it was. So huge testament to the resilience that we've seen from Bradish, just either whether he's working through pain right now or not. I mean, he said that he feels pretty good and looks absurdly good anyway. I mean, you look at his pitch mix right now, the sinker and the slider are unreal. A 118 opponent batting average for the sinker, his number one used pitch so far in 2025, and a 100 batting average flat for the slider is just unreal for Bradish. So I want to ask you a question though, because if you look at the 2026 rotation, say it's Bradish, Trevor Rogers, maybe healthy Grayson Rodriguez. I don't know if you're slotting him in for 2026, and some other guys maybe. Is there one prospect that you see right now, just at any point early in 2026, that you could see slotting in with those other guys?
Trey Gibson.
Yeah.
I think Trey Gibson is the dude. I mean,
So
based on some of the conversations we have had with folks around the industry about Trey Gibson, I believe it was Aram Layton in our interview who said whenever he asks a minor league hitter who one of the toughest at bats was facing a pitcher, a lot of the answers are Trey Gibson. And that is a really encouraging sign if you're an Orioles fan. So I think Trey Gibson, already at AAA Norfolk, could certainly make an impact next year. I think it's going to be interesting, too, what the role for Tyler Wells looks like. Is he going to be in the rotation next season? He has 2 starts so far this season. As we are live here on Wednesday at 11 a.m., he is going to start tonight, or this afternoon, against the Chicago White Sox. He's got a 231 ERA so far. A last start out, 6 2/3, 6 strikeouts, 1 earned run against the Pirates. He was really good against a really good Padres lineup as well. 5 innings, 2 earned runs. So is Tyler Wells in that equation as well. I'm not sure, but still the encouraging storyline for this season is that Tyler Wells, too, came back and just looked awesome. The Orioles will have to determine what they want his role to be for 2026, whether that is in the starting rotation or as a potential high leverage reliever. We know the Orioles have a need there next season as well. Does he slot into that role? I don't know, but it's the same story as Kyle Bradish, where they just come back and, there's Tyler Wells again. Like he didn't just miss a year plus. No,
it's extremely impressive how those two guys have come back. I mean, you could have slotted Albert Suarez in that equation as well, unfortunately, before the injury and the elbow discomfort. He looked really, really great. 2.31 ERA in 5 appearances. So the way that the Orioles have been able to bring back these 3 guys, obviously Suarez is a little bit of a different story, and you hope that he can be back for 2026 as well. But really, really impressive stuff to be as good, if not better, than what you were before the injury.
Yeah, and that, like I said, you never know with that kind of stuff. We kind of take it for granted in a more modern era of baseball where it's, Tommy John is more commonplace and guys come back and they're usually fine, but you never know. And these are 3 important pieces. Obviously, Albert Suarez, as you mentioned, hope for the best on the injury front there, but for Kyle Bradish and Tyler Wells, they have come back. They have looked really good. And that is an important piece going into 2026, because I think before, Kyle Bradish especially is the example there, before he comes back and looks this good, at least personally, going into 2026, I'm going, okay, can you really rely that much on Kyle Bradish going into next season? It's going to be his first full season after Tommy John. I'm sure they are still going to have to monitor and watch his innings next year, but I think you can count on him being a similar Kyle Bradish pitcher as he was in 2023. Whether he hits that same amount of innings, I don't know, but he is still going to be effective. Yeah,
and while some of these other storylines were unexpected ones, at least for Kyle Bradish, you never really knew he was going to come back in the way that he has. But it was one of those storylines where you knew, okay, you have your own little trade deadline at the end or in the middle, towards the end of the 2025 season, or you knew you had your own kind of ability to get a high leverage or high end of the rotation.
Yeah, you were going to get a jolt in September once he came back.
So you knew that was going to be a storyline, and you knew that you were going to have Kyle Bradish come back at some point late in 2025, but you didn't know it was going to come back in this way. Also, kind of easy to forget that Trevor Rogers was coming back from injury. It's obviously not the same kind and same caliber of a Tommy John, but he also has come back better than before with an injury. So really, really exciting stuff on the rotation side of things, especially when you know that there's room to add in the offseason.
Yeah, and again, this season has obviously not gone as the Orioles had hoped. They were just eliminated from playoff contention last night. So we're not trying to sit here and say that everything has been perfect in 2025. It has been far from it. But when you are looking ahead to 2026, I think you probably feel better about the rotation going into next season than you thought you would even going into this year. If you were looking ahead to 2026 for whatever reason, thinking about what this rotation could potentially look like. I know Grayson Rodriguez has unfortunately become a bit of a question mark just with the unknowns around his injury and where he might be. But let's cross fingers and hope that Grayson Rodriguez is healthy and ready to go for the start of next season. Kyle Bradish, I think, is probably trending up from where I thought he would be at the end of 2025. Trevor Rogers is obviously trending way, way up compared to where we thought he would be to end 2025. So I think you feel better about this 2026 rotation than you thought you would, despite how the season has gone.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And especially with, like I mentioned, some room to add both on the rotation side of things, but also in the bullpen, because we know that the bullpen probably hasn't been one of the most epic or highlighted storylines of the 2025 season, especially with Felix Bautista falling to some serious injuries. So the bullpen itself, like when you know how they have had to maneuver and try and work through the ins and outs of who could be on the 2026 level roster, knowing that you have a really, really strong rotation going into 2026 without additions in the offseason is a good sign, as opposed to where you started the 2025 season with, an iffy rotation and a bit of, you had guys in your bullpen, but it was still a little bit iffy.
Yeah, the rotation, you certainly feel better going into 2026 than I think most people thought you would. The bullpen,
that'll be an off-season topic.
That's going to be an off-season topic because you certainly don't feel as strong about the bullpen as you were hoping to, given the injury to Felix Bautista and some of the guys with team control that were traded away. But we're going to talk about that in the offseason. Another encouraging storyline for me, Jackson Holliday.
Yeah.
I know he has kind of been plugging away. There's been some ups and downs, but you still have to remember that he is 21 years old. The expectations for Jackson Holliday are through the roof, understandably so. This was the number 1 overall draft pick. We know the bloodlines. We know how good he was in the minor leagues. We know the meteoric rise through the farm system that Jackson Holliday took. He is 21 years old. He has an OPS in the mid 700s. It's 718 right now. He took some massive steps forward this year. And there have been some down months, and there have been some really up months.
Yeah.
The month of September has been really, really good for Jackson Holliday. He is walking out and out at an outstanding rate, more similar to what he did in his minor league career. And he's putting bat on baseball. The defense, I know, has been iffy at second base this year. This is still his first full season playing the position. If you remember last year when Jackson Holliday was getting called up towards the beginning of the year and then sent back down to Norfolk, it was, he's trying to learn how to play second base. This was his first full season actually doing it. And there were some range issues here and there, certainly some plays that you would like to see Jackson Holliday make, but he is getting better there. He is making improvements there, and he's about to have a full offseason there, having a year of information of what he did at second base and what he needs to get better at. And he's going to be 22 next season.
Yeah.
We can't just look at Jackson Holliday from the perspective of, this was the number 1 prospect in baseball. He should be lighting the world on fire immediately. Some guys do that, and it takes some guys a little bit longer to get going. But this is still a player who was in the conversation for an all-star selection mid-season and is going to end the year, with not an unbelievable season numbers-wise. It's probably going to be close to a 2-WAR season. The OPS right around 715. On base percentage around 325, batting average around 250. That's a good year. And he leads the team in homers.
I know.
Which nobody was expecting either.
Yeah, and I think that the discussion here is specifically the year 1 to year 2 jump for Holiday, because sure, you could have expected a lot from him right when he made his first big league stint last year, and you could have expected, okay, he should be better at his year 2 level than he is right now. But I think when you look at the year 1, year 2 jump, it's unreal. And like you mentioned, he's still got work to do on defense, but he has been playing every single day, and that is valuable experience for him going into his 3rd season. But there's an 18.8% walk rate since August 9th.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at it conjunctively, or kind of working alongside the swinging at first pitches going up 5% more, sure, you can say he got a lot more aggressive at the plate from 2024 to 2025, which is great. But at the same time, since August 9th, he's been a lot more selective, which is also a really important note. Kind of the same discussion a little bit with Dylan Beavers, where he upped his aggression in the minor leagues, but now it's selective aggression. And for Holiday, I think you can say the same thing, at least since September 1st. His strikeout rate is down 11.5% since 2024. He's chasing almost 4.5% less than last year. I think that the improvements here are one of the best storylines for the Orioles in 2025 from Holiday.
Yeah, absolutely. And not for nothing, if you are looking back at the 2022 draft, where Jackson Holiday was not the consensus number 1 overall prospect, it was between him and Drew Jones. Most people thought were, the number 1 guys there. Not trying to pick on Drew Jones. This is just a comparison of where Jackson Holiday is at. Drew Jones has spent the entire season in high A, playing 123 games with a 694 OPS. So I think the Orioles probably made the right decision. There is kind of the takeaway. So Jackson Holiday, a lot of good steps forward this year, and I think you're going to see him take another leap next season.
Yeah.
My final storyline, and one that was just really cool this season, got to give some love to Tony Mansolino.
Yeah.
The interim skipper, who is 56 and 52. Since taking over as the Orioles interim manager. That's a good baseball team.
Yeah.
4 games over 500 is not a playoff baseball team at this point in the American League, but it is a good baseball team, especially when you consider the circumstances under which Tony Mansolino took over the reins here. Obviously, when you are making a change at manager, that is a tumultuous decision. Sometimes it's a decision that has to be made, but it's a decision that is going to have a big impact on the clubhouse and just on the organization as a whole. Tony Mansolino comes in, weathers that storm, I think, well. I know the Orioles started slow once Mansolino took the reins, but they have been a really good baseball team since. And consider the guys that they dealt away at the deadline. This is still a roster with talented players on it, but they dealt away a lot of talented players at the deadline, which was a move that made sense given where the Orioles were in the standings, and it is playing into a lot of the conversation we have had with the positive developments in the farm system and with guys like Jeremiah Jackson and Dylan Beavers getting a chance at the big league level, but you still traded away talent, and yet they have remained competitive and they have still won a lot of baseball games. So you got to tip your cap to the job that Tony Mansolino has done coming in to have this team playing above 500 baseball. And he has always talked about the importance of not wanting this Orioles clubhouse to have a culture of losing a bunch of baseball games, because there's a scenario where this thing just goes in the complete wrong direction over the last 3 or 4 months, where, guys check out and they don't play hard because they know they're out of the standing. That has not happened.
Yeah.
There are guys in that clubhouse who would not let that happen, and Tony Mansolino is one of those guys. And they have been playing good competitive baseball for 3-4 months.
Yeah, I think a huge amount of credit goes to Tony Mansolino for how the Orioles have played the last few months, like you said, and also just kind of mindset-wise. Like, obviously, Tony Mansolino said that when he got the position as interim manager, when everything went down a number of months ago, he was like, listen, I didn't want to be in this position. This is not how I would have wanted it to go, but I'm here. I got to learn, and I got to support this ball club in the best way possible. And I think that as the months have gone by, he's started to emphasize his mindset. Listen, like, I know we're not making it to the playoffs, but you got to play every single game like it's a pennant race. And I think that has translated to the players as well, because we heard Jordan Westburg, which we knew he was going to kind of be that leader anyway, but Jordan Westburg saying, listen, we know we have a lot of pressure on our backs. We know that there's a lot to play for, because the way we play right now as a team that's not in a playoff position answers a lot of questions for 2026. And I think that kind of mindset and emphasis has started from the top level of interim manager and Tony Mansolino. Not to mention, he's a very interactive manager, which is great to see.
Yeah.
Him out there every single day at batting practice or fielding practice, whatever you name it. He is there working with guys like Jackson Holliday on fielding at second base, Kobe Mayo. I think that there is a lot to be said for how he has managed the club in the last few months. Obviously, no hate to what it was before, because Brandon Hyde got the Orioles to the playoffs multiple years in a row. So I think regardless of the scenario, like you mentioned, tip your cap to Tony Mansolino.
Yeah, and I think the game on Saturday in Toronto is a pretty good example of what you're talking about there, where Tomoyuki Sugano is pitching pretty well in the 4th and 5th innings. He gets hit around a little bit, and then, well, not hit around, but there's some hard contact there in the 6th inning as well. And Tony Mansolino pulls Tomoyuki Sugano after 6 innings. He only threw 63 pitches. He goes to the bullpen, and he tries to win that game. Granted, it didn't end up working out in the Orioles' favor. Yennier Cano gives up a couple of runs in the 9th. But that just goes to show how Tony Mansolino has managed this baseball team. And like you mentioned and Jordan Westberg has mentioned, it says a lot about where this team is at and their mindset, where, yeah, Tomoyuki Sugano had 63 pitches through 6 innings, but Tony Mansolino still felt like it was important to go to the bullpen to try to win that game as if their playoff hopes were on the line. And that's what the Orioles are going to continue to do over the next week and a half, because they want to win as many of these baseball games as possible. They want to go into 2026 with positive momentum into the offseason to, show the front office, hey, you guys should be investing for win now moves because we are good enough to be doing that.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And regardless of what happens in 2026 for who's the manager, I think you look back at the 2025 season and say, look, this guy, Tony Mansolino, did a heck of a job for what he was dealt in the 2025 season. But if that's your last favorite storyline, I have one more that we didn't mention. We talked about it a lot last week when we were discussing most valuable Oriole. And it's just the fact that Gunnar Henderson and Jackson Holliday stayed healthy, because I think that is a huge one. And yes, you could say that the other ones were a bit expected. You kind of needed expectations for a guy like Gunnar Henderson to stay healthy. And you're just glad that met that expectations, but it might not have been the best offensive season for Gunnar Henderson, a 788 OPS compared to 893 in 2024. That we knew was going to be hard to top anyway after an OPS almost 900 in 2024. But Henderson himself created 14 runs between base running and batting value. So I think that him being there every day and being an option every day is really huge, especially just given the kind of leadership role that he is expected to have in 2026.
Yeah, not for nothing. Amidst a season where, the Orioles have just not been able to stay healthy at all, having your double play combination of the future and Gunnar Henderson and Jackson Holliday staying on the field is an important thing. Even if it is a bit of a down season offensively, you could say for Gunnar Henderson, it's still a 5 WAR season out of him. So important for those guys to stay on the field and stay healthy. One quick question from Bradley on Facebook says, love the show. Thanks, Bradley. Will it continue in the off season? I think we're going to take a break for a bit in October, so we haven't worked out the specifics of the schedule yet. We will have another episode next week as the Orioles wrap up the regular season. I would imagine we will have one more episode at the beginning of October after that to do a bit of a season wrap-up. And then usually we take a little bit of a break during the playoffs because the offseason hasn't happened until the end of the World Series. So I would imagine, Bradley, if you are tuning in with us every Wednesday, then we will have 2 more shows after this one to wrap up the season a little bit, and then we will be back after the end of the postseason to have our off-season discussions.
Yeah.
But I think that'll just about do it for this week's edition of The Bird's Nest. Thank you so much for following along with us on YouTube and Facebook as we are live every Wednesday at 11 a.m. on those 2 platforms. If you didn't catch us live, you can catch us after the fact on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us here on The Bird's Nest. Big thank you to Amy Jennings behind the scenes for producing this one. For Annie Claff, I am Brendan Mortensen, and we'll catch you next time.